I will start by introducing myself. I'm Gina Clitheroe. I use she, her pronouns. I'm with the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, and I'm the Farm to Institution Program Manager. We're here today to talk about the Farm to School and Early Childhood Capacity Building Grant, which is currently open and accepting applications through November 14th. Thanks for being here to learn more about the program. And I'm not sure, Rebecca, if you're able to jump in and introduce yourself briefly as well.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Brockett. I also use she, her pronouns. I'm a grants and contracts administrator here at the agency. So when you get to your process of submitting an application, if you run into any technical problems with WebGrants, I would be the person you want to reach out to.
Awesome. Thanks, Rebecca. Great. Well, let's jump on in here. So for the mechanics of using this webinar software, folks are automatically muted when you enter, but if you have, if you'd like to be unmuted, you can just raise your hand and then I can allow you to unmute. But anytime throughout the presentation, feel free to just jump in the chat and drop any questions that you might have. We'll also have some time at the end for questions. So the overall agenda for today, we're going to offer a brief overview of the Farm to School and Early Childhood Capacity Building Grant. We'll talk through the process for getting your application materials together, and then Rebecca's going to offer a web grants tutorial to see what it looks like to submit an application in the system. And then we're trying to reserve like about 20 minutes towards the end of the meeting for questions. But again, we'll also answer questions throughout. So I just want to start by offering an overview of the Farm to School and Early Childhood Capacity Building Grant in the context of the entire Farm to School and Early Childhood Grants program. So each year, since 2007, the Vermont State Legislature appropriates money from the State General Fund to the Farm to School program at the Agency of Agriculture. And we move all of the money that we receive out the door in the form of grants to early childhood programs, schools, and nonprofits that are supporting farm to school programming. So the program was started in the Vermont State Legislature in 2007, and over the course of the duration of this program, as of our most recent report to the legislature in February of this year, 266 grants have been awarded and over $1.9 million have been invested in these grants. And you can see on the map here that we've covered most of the state over the course of this grant program. And you can see that we have 3 different grant programs. The Farm to School and Early Childhood Capacity Building Grant, which is open now, that shows on the map as the green dots. The Farm to School and Early Childhood Community Supported Agriculture, or the CSA grant. And that grant is shown, that has more recipients. So it's a mini grant program that's got a wider geographic reach there. You'll see the orange dots kind of scattered all over. That is a CSA mini grant program that opens up in the spring. And then the Vision grant are those purple dots, and that grant also opens up in the spring. So I just wanted to offer that context that this is one of the 3 grant programs that the agency manages through this funding stream from the Vermont State Legislature. Each year at this point in time, the agency is receiving $500,000 from the legislature, and $150,000 of that goes into this capacity building grant program for the grants that are created. And then there's additional funding allocated for the technical assistance components of this grant. So the capacity building grant, the purpose is to build and strengthen farm to school and early childhood programs. And specifically, this grant program relies on the 3Cs model of farm to school, which was coined by Vermont Feed, which is a project of Shelburne Farms and NOFA, Vermont, focused on food and agricultural education. So this is a helpful little diagram of what we mean by the 3Cs. So the 3Cs are bringing farm to school into the cafeteria, serving local food in the cafeteria. Another C is for community, so engaging with the community. Some examples are harvest dinners, farm visits, and then farm to school in the classroom looks like the integration of agriculture, food systems, and the environment kind of throughout a variety of different curriculum topics and classes. And so those are the 3Cs. That's what we're talking about when we say the 3Cs, bringing farm to school to the classroom, the cafeteria, and the community. And so this grant is really relying on all three of these components being there in order to build really strong farm to school programming that sustains over the long term and has a really significant impact on kids and also our rural communities. The purpose of the capacity building grant is to increase the use of local foods, increase agriculture, nutrition, and food systems education, help teachers, administrators, and staff promote healthy eating habits, strengthen connections between schools and other educators with the Vermont agricultural community, increase the number of Vermont children participating in child nutrition programs, and advancing a school's local wellness policy goals, which is applicable to our K-12 applicants only. And that's a new kind of goal that we're stating here. It's always been part of the program, but it's part of the application this year. So wanted to flag that as one of our goals. Big picture, the capacity building grant offers $5,000 to $20,000 awards, and that funding can be used to help schools reach their unique farm to school and early childhood goals, which are flexible and driven by the grantee project team. So the award range for the Farm to School and Early Childhood Capacity Building Grant is based on the number of students enrolled, and then there's an eligible amount that every applicant can request based on the number of students that would be impacted by your project. And then you can also request additional funds up to $20,000 being the largest possible award, after providing some justification for why your project needs more than kind of the eligible amount or the default amount based on the number of students served. This grant funding is dispersed in 3 payments. Each of those is tied to a deliverable throughout the grant period. So 50% is provided at the beginning of the grant after you sign the paperwork. Another 30% is released at the halfway point, which is going to be in October 2025. And then the final report, once that's submitted and approved, that will release the final portion of funds. This grant does not require you to submit receipts or invoices and can be used in a variety of ways, such as staff development, cooking events, local food, stipends for farms. There are a lot of different ways that the grant funding can be used. And I'll note that while the agency is not requesting that grantees submit paperwork on receipts or invoices, all grantees should definitely be keeping that information, but you keep it in your own records in case there's an audit that might be requested. But the agency is not going to be reviewing those documents as part of our process. So who can apply for this grant program? The eligible applicants are early childhood centers, independent schools, public schools, and supervisory unions on behalf of a school or a group of schools. I did want to call out here, and you'll note in bold that we changed the eligibility this year for registered family child care providers. Home care providers initially, when this grant was created, were not eligible to apply on their own and needed to apply as a group. And then that eligibility was loosened for a few years, and individual home care providers were eligible to apply. And this year for FY25, we're kind of reverting back to the way that the program was initially designed in 2017 when we started offering these grants to early childhood programs. And so now individual home care providers do need to collaborate with at least two other home care providers in order to submit an application. And the reason that we made that change this year is that this grant is really relies on a team-based approach to engaging with the professional development and building an action plan where you're working collaboratively to build a culture of farm to school that lasts for a long time. And because this is a team-based approach, we had found that groups of registered home care providers were able to utilize more of the grant than individual home care providers that were either just like a one-person operation or maybe one full-time, one part-time. So this is a new eligibility requirement. Just wanted to flag it. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We are also recommending that groups of registered home care providers, which could include also some center-based programs, that they consider working with their early childhood professional network to convene a group that can engage with farm to school and support each other with farm to school activities in the long term beyond the timeline of the grant. So some other things to note are that organizations such as nonprofits and community groups cannot apply for this grant, but they can be named as co-applicants to a grant that's submitted by one of the educational institutions listed above. And organizations that have active FY24 farm to school and early childhood capacity building grants are not eligible to apply. Those grants are currently underway and they will be overlapping with this grant rollout. So they are not eligible to access this opportunity at this time. But if you have an FY24 grant, feel free to apply for this program when it opens up next fall for the FY26 awards. So at a high level, the approach to this grant is that applicants develop a project team, and that team includes educators, administrators, food service staff if your program serves food, students, parents, and community members. And this team is really the structure of the grant. That's the foundation of it in order to build long-term commitment and engagement with farm to school beyond, just like having one person at a school that's really leading the charge. Having this team-based approach helps us build buy-in and support across the whole organization. At a high level, we typically are awarding between 12 and 15 grants per year is kind of our current capacity with the available funding. And all awarded grantees engage in a full day action planning day where the teams that are awarded across the state all converge together in person, which we haven't actually done since before COVID, but we are committed to having it work this year. We had a snow blizzard event that derailed our in-person plans last year. But the goal is that you get to meet with all of the other awarded teams and for this in-person action planning day where you work with your coach to build this action plan that's focused on farm to school engagement and sustaining farm to school for the long term. And you have a chance to also learn with and connect with all these other farm to school teams. So that's a really unique part of the grant approach that I just wanted to call out. And then also part of the foundation of this grant is the access to technical assistance and coaching that comes with your grant award. So in addition to financial assistance, you also get technical assistance and you also get an assigned grant coach. The project period is just under a year and a half. It's from February 2025 to June 2026. and the application deadline is November 14th. So I wanted to get a little bit more context into the technical assistance component of the grant. So when you are awarded, you get access to all of this technical assistance. And these providers are covering these 4 different topic areas: curriculum integration, local food procurement, meal program viability, and school gardens. And so these are some of the examples of ways that the technical assistance providers can support. I will drop a link in the chat as well to the overview, another overview document of the TA associated with this grant. This is linked in the request for applications, but I think sometimes it can be hard to visualize what we mean by technical assistance being available. And so this document kind of lays out what some of those opportunities are, some examples of the types of work that they've provided to other grant teams in the past. So in addition to this technical assistance in these 4 key areas, grantees also are assigned a grant coach to work one-on-one with their project team throughout the grant process, helping them write their action plan, helping them kind of access and best utilize their grant funds and the technical assistance opportunities available to them to help them reach their farm to school goals. And we've found over time that this approach of having financial assistance, technical assistance, and also a grant coach and the mentorship associated with that is what can be really important to sustaining farm to school initiatives in the long term. So a little bit more about the coaching component of the grant. Each team receives a grant coach as soon as they're awarded the grant, and the coaches are experts from within the Farm to School and Early Childhood Network. And these coaches serve as thought partners, organizers, resource connectors for your team. And your coach ends up being kind of like a mentor and a primary support to help you throughout your grant process. They attend all your farm to school team meetings, and they're there to kind of pull in resources and connect you with the broader network to make sure that you're getting the support you need and you're not alone. The grantee expectations are that grantees will create this action plan and timeline. They'll also complete a farm to school and early childhood rubric, which is like an assessment tool that you do as part of the action planning process to help you set your goals. You'll align your grant budget with your action plan. You'll grow relationships in your school, early childhood, and local community. You'll share out your story, whether that's through newsletters or by hosting events to talk to your community about this grant that you've received and the work that you're doing with Farm to School as a result. And you'll utilize any number of resources from within the Farm to School network and from the technical assistance providers and coaches that are there to support you. And they can offer you, curriculum, help you organizing farm visits, and help you connect to the greater farming and farm to school community. I wanted to put a brief note in here with respect to the application there's a new addition to the grant application this year. I'm not sure how many folks have applied for this grant before who are on the call right now. But this is, if you have applied before, this is a new question for you to be aware of going into it. So that is the local wellness policy, which it's a federal kind of rule that all schools have to have this local wellness policy. It's been in place since 2010. And this local wellness policy is something that the Agency of Education works on, and the Agency of Ag is working to build more of a connection between us and the Agency of Education, specifically with respect to clarifying for the Agency of Education how Farm to School can really support and strengthen school wellness. And so there's a new question added to the grant application this year to help draw those connections and illustrate for the review committee how this project is going to support local wellness in general within the school. And so that new question is written out below for K-12 applicants only, because those are the folks that are impacted by, have this requirement for a local wellness policy to be developed. How will this grant help your school advance your local wellness policy goals? And we will, I'll drop a link in the chat to the local wellness policy information as well. That is something to be, if you have questions about it, feel free to reach out to me, but there should be plenty of information on that site as well. But just wanted to flag this because it's new to the application this year. Okay, we have now entered the how to apply section of this presentation. Running a little bit behind here. The applications are submitted through Web Grants, which is the agency's online grant management system. A complete copy of the application questions are available in the request for applications for this grant, which can be found on the grant webpage, and I'll drop a link to the grant webpage shortly. Applications must be submitted by your organization's fiscal agent or fiscal management contact. So, for example, if you work at a school, and that means that the grant will actually need to be received by the school district and then sent to the school. So the school district has to kind of be the one to actually sign the grant agreement to accept those funds. And, or if you are a group of early childhood programs that's going to apply together, then the early childhood program that is going to kind of be the administrator of all of those, kind of like holding the pieces of engaging with the Agency of Ag, submitting reports to us regularly that summarizes the work of the whole group. That would be the fiscal agent for all of the work. And so that must be the person who submits the application within that organization. The application is open now, and the deadline is November 14th at 1:59 p.m. So flagging that time of day, it's not 11:59 p.m. This is a midday application deadline. So recommend flagging that on your calendar. Some of the application materials that you'll need to have available when you go to complete your application in Web Grants. The percentage of children at each organization that qualify for free or reduced price meals, the total number of children served and enrolled in each of the schools or early childhood programs that are part of your application if you're applying on behalf of a larger group. You need all of the names and contact information for the people in your project team, and your project team should have people from across your organization or from several organizations if you're working in a group of providers or a school district that's applying on behalf of multiple schools. You'll also need to provide the information for the organization's fiscal agent and the designated contact person for the grant. Letters of support are required for this award because this is a team-based approach. We need to see that there's interest and support from across the organization in order to know that it's going to be a viable project where there's going to be the good collaboration over the course of the grant experience. So letters of support are required from whoever the administrative leader is, whether that's a superintendent, a child care program or director, or principal or other administrative leader. If you're applying as a consortium, then the director or superintendent of director or principal of each of those organizations has to submit a letter of support. There should be a letter of support as well. It's required to have a letter of support as well from someone who works in the food program. If your school, all schools have food programs, but not all early childhood programs have food programs. So if you're in an early childhood program and you don't have a food, like a nutrition person, that's okay. But for schools, it is required to have buy-in and a letter of support from the food service director. And yeah, again, if the fiscal agent is somebody that's not your direct organization, but you're working with somebody else to receive the grant and do the paperwork on behalf of your organization, then they also need to submit a letter of support. And then lastly, just want to flag, there's a standard requirement for all state grants called the Act 154 Water Quality Certificate. And it's a simple attestation that your organization is not out of compliance with any water quality regulations. It's pretty straightforward, but you'll see that in every grant application through the Agency of Agriculture. You just open up that form and read it, and if all of that looks correct to you, then you sign the attestation and upload that document to the application. This is the grant timeline. The application opened on October 3rd, closes on the 14th, and late December is when award announcements will be made. After grants are awarded, this is the full kind of grant expectation timeline. So the program starts in February. You've got an onboarding webinar, and then you start to work with your coach to develop your to complete the farm to school rubric in advance of the action planning day. Then you go to the action planning day in March, and that date has not been held yet, but it's going to be sent out to all of the awarded recipients in December. And then the grantee works with their coach to develop their action plan. And then from March 2025 through June 2026, you're implementing your action plan as written at that action planning day. And there are a couple of touch points along the way where, as I mentioned earlier, where the funding comes through, where you have reports that are required. And we also are adding this year like a midpoint webinar to also have a moment to touch base halfway through the grant. So that is the award timeline. This is a high-level look at the review process. These are the 5 categories that the review committee will be scoring applications based upon. Applications are reviewed by Agency of Agriculture staff, Agency of Education staff, and also someone from the Department of Health, and then also some like farm to school network providers, technical assistance providers also provide support to the review process. And there's a scoring is conducted independently by each reviewer, and then we meet to discuss the scores and the final selection and any like clarifications that we have for the grantees that we're going to award. And these are the components that applications are reviewed upon. So highly recommend going to that, reviewing this in the detailed descriptions of what's within each of these categories, which is in the request for applications. Okay, and I think this is the point where I pass the floor over to Rebecca to offer a brief web grants tutorial. I'm gonna stop sharing.
Okay. So you should be able to see my screen now. So this is the landing page for web grants. If you already have an account, easy peasy, you'll just enter your username and password here and sign in. If you don't already have an account, please click on this yellow click here to register button. That will take you to the registration page. Any fields you see here in kind of this maroon/red with an asterisk, those are required fields. So please make sure you complete all the required fields, both under your personal contact information and under your organization information. So once you've filled all these fields, you're going to want to let the system know that you are not a robot by clicking on the check next to the CAPTCHA, and then you'll save registration information. What that'll do is it'll notify us that we have a new registration request. Registration requests are typically completed within 1 to 2 business days. So please make sure that if you need to register, you're doing so well in advance of the application closing. If you might be registered already, or if you are, but you can't remember your login information, if you forgot your user ID, below this green button and above the yellow here, there's 2 options for you. You can click on the Forgot User ID button, enter your email address, and your user ID will be sent to you. And if you forgot both, if you click on this Reset Password, you enter your user ID and your email and then submit, and then it'll send you that information. I should confirm also, I'm sorry, I skipped this part. If you've, once your registration request has been completed, if you're a new user, you'll get 2 separate emails. One will have your user ID and one will have your temporary password. So once you are in the system, if you are a new user, you might want to reset your temporary password. So in the left-hand panel, there's this gray navigation section. If you click on My Profile, you can click on this blue Reset Password to the right. If you copy paste in your temp password, you can enter in a new password and confirm, and then just hit Save Password and have that updated. Or if you're an existing user, but maybe you need to update some information, you can click on this green Edit My Profile button, and you can update your email or your physical address or your phone number, whatever needs updated here, and then just click on green Save My Profile. So going back to the first kind of landing page, so say you've done all that and now you need to start your application. So again, you're going to go over here to the left-hand panel in gray. You're going to click on Funding Opportunities, and then you're going to look for the funding opportunity you want to apply for. So in this case, it's the FY25 Farm to School and Early Childhood Capacity Building Grant. So you're going to click on that. And then this takes you to kind of like I would say like the cover page, page 1 of what this looks like. It's going to give you a brief description. It's going to have website links on the bottom. Some important links here, for example, are your how-to guide on how to apply. So if you open this up, this is going to take you through multiple of the steps we're going to go over here now. But it also has a link to the Farm to School webpage, the webpage for this particular funding opportunity, and it's going to have a link to this webinar. So if you need to come back and look at it, that's going to be easily available to you here. So to start your new application, you're going to click on this green Start New Application button on the left. It's going to first ask you to give it a title. So any title you want. You can put it here. Kind of whatever makes sense to you for your project. It might be a couple word summary, but whatever makes sense to you. And then you're going to click Save Form Information. And then what it's going to give you the option for us to change your organization. So we do have several users in the system that might, for example, be, they might work at a school district. And so they might be submitting an application for multiple different schools or locations. So if they are already associated there, they might change their organization to one of those different schools or locations. So that's where you'd update that. And then you're going to save form information again. And then it's going to give you the option to add additional contacts. So this black additional contacts option here, if you click into there, anybody who's associated to that organization, it's going to give you the option to add them here. This is really important because if they need to be able to edit this application as well, this is where you give them access. So If you know up front that somebody is going to need access and they're either not already a user in web grants or they are, but they're not associated to this organization, number one, please make sure that they register before you start your application so that you can go ahead and associate them on your end. And then if they're an existing user that's not associated, please email me because I can associate them on the back end. So when you get to this point, you can easily add them. If you've already, started your application and then you've realized now you need to add somebody, like, for example, maybe you have a grant writer coming in to help you. If they're already in the system or and they need access, let me know. I can deal with that on the back end. I can add them to have access to your organization, and then either you or I can add them, come back to this page and add them as an additional contact. So once you've done that, you're going to save form information again, and it's going to take you to kind of the first page of starting your application. So you'll notice there's this, what looks like this scary red section in the middle. Don't worry about that. That's just saying that you can't submit your application yet because the forms are not complete. And of course they're not complete because you just started. So don't let that throw you off. So you'll notice under that, there's a section of components, and these are all the different forms for your application. You'll notice here that the first one is general information, and that's got a green check here. That's because that's what we just completed. So the next form is this, what we call the global application form. So I'm going to click on that. And this is the form that everybody will start with for all of our applications. So this is just general information about your organization. So you would start filling that out. So again, any font you see here with red with an asterisk, these are required fields. So please complete them or it won't let you move on. Well, it won't let you mark the form as complete. You can always at any time save form and then come back and edit it again. So that's options available to you. But another thing to note here is that there's also some optional information. You do not have to complete it. It's totally up to you. It just gives us some helpful demographic information for use for our reporting purposes or to kind of see where we're reaching. And then at the bottom, there's an additional section where you can click on one of these links to do an optional anonymous additional survey of demographic information. So this is not in any way connected to your application. We won't know who you are. It's a 100% anonymous survey, but if you would like to give us that information, you can click on one of these links to be taken to the survey and then fill it out. So once you have saved this form, once you have completed this form, or maybe you're gonna come back, but if you choose to go on to the next form, there's two options to get there. So you can save this form. If you're completely done with this form, say you filled it all out, you would also mark as complete this orange button with a check. That's just saying I'm completely done with this form. Or maybe you're just saving it to come back. That's fine. You can always click on this edit form again to modify. So say you want to go on to the next form for whatever reason, you can either navigate for one of these tabs here kind of in the middle, this middle gray section with the blue text. So you can click on any of these and go to the next form, or at the very bottom of this form, you can click on this blue next button in the bottom right corner. So that takes you to the next form, and you're kind of already in edit mode this way. So say you start completing this form. Again, all of the red font with an asterisk is mandatory. What I want to highlight on this particular form is there in the middle here is what we call a multi-list. And to edit those, it's a little bit strange. So if you're already editing this form, you're not going to be able to what we call add row here. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to save the multi-list. And then if you scroll down and back to it, now you can actually add a row to the multi-list. So if you click on this green add row button, it's going to give you those fields you need to complete for the multi-list. So say you've completed those with all of the applicable information. You're going to save row. And now you'll notice that you've added that row here. So once you've added a row or multiple rows, you can actually edit those rows all at once as a grid. So if you click on this Edit All Rows button here in green, now it'll open up the entire form, including that section of rows in a grid format, so you can edit it. The next kind of different field I want to go to is kind of twofold. So at the end of your application, the last form is this state water quality compliance certification form. So this is basically, this is a requirement for state funding. It's basically asking you to confirm that you're in good standing with water quality. So hopefully you've selected yes. But then you also need to download and complete this Act 154 Good Standing Certification form. So if you right click and open a new tab, you'll need to download and complete and sign this form and then upload it back into WebGrants. So to upload the file, you're going to come to this attachment field. You're going to hit select file. You're going to locate the file you want to upload. So in this case, I'm going to select this Word document temp. And you can either select and hit open, or you can double click. And then this gray here, now that you see the file name, is noting that it's selected that file. So if you save form, now you'll notice this file is attached, and you can, of course, also open it and double check. But now the file is here. So I want to just kind of go back to our general list of fields, to our app list. So you'll notice here the last edited, these are all the forms we just touched. But what you'll want to do in order to actually complete your application, you're going to want to make sure you've also marked all the forms as complete, which that was that orange button, mark as complete, that you saw earlier. So when that's all done, you'll see that all of these fields will have a gray or a green, checkbox next to them. Once all of these are marked as complete with that checkbox, then you'll have an option to click on the submit button. It won't display until all these forms are completed. And then I just want to highlight too as well. So if you've begun your application and you're going to come back later to get back to your application, you can do it two ways. So it'll display here on your first page under approaching deadlines and the work assignments. It will display here, or you can go back to funding opportunities and you can click on the funding opportunity again. And then it will display here under current applications, and you can click on it. And then there's going to be a green edit application button, and it's going to take you again back to this application details section where you can start completing these components again. So you'll just click on them and edit form, and then you have access to go back through all these. And so that's my piece.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. Wonderful. Okay. I'm going to drop a link to the grant webpage in the chat, which has the request for applications there. It also has this web grants application guide, which I'm also going to drop in the chat, which walks through some of the steps that Rebecca just showed. But again, if you have any questions as you're working through that, refer to this how-to guide, and you can also reach directly out to Rebecca. Her contact info is on the grant webpage as well. But if you have questions about the application, then with respect to like the content of the application, reach out to me. Or ask a question now. We have another like 13 minutes together. I know this was a ton of information. I know this is a complicated grant program, but I just want to emphasize that a lot of the hard work for the application is going to be pulling together your team with the, food service administrators, educators. And once that is pulled together and you get into the grant program, there's a ton of support available. So we've seen a lot of great projects come out of this grant program, and yeah, excited to hopefully see some new applications this year from folks that haven't applied before, if that is you. But yeah, we can open up for questions. So feel free to raise your hand if you see that option on the top, and then I can unmute you or just drop your question into the chat. Question. I'm not able to unmute. What additional documentation do you need to ask for a grant amount above beyond what is allotted per a school's number of children? Great question, Becca and Megan. You just need to provide like a written paragraph explaining why you're asking for additional funding. And I actually meant to drop, so if you go into the request for applications, you'll see all of this information here, but this slide, or sorry, this little screenshot part of the RFA shows the that eligible award amount that I was talking about earlier and that Becca and Megan are referring to. So say you are a school and your school has 50 kids in it, then your like automatic eligible award amount would be $7,000 if your project is funded. But say you have a project that is actually going to, that there's a project that is going to cost more than that. Say you have a vision of like building a greenhouse or, some other project that your whole team is like, this is what we want to do. Then you might know that you actually need more than $7,000 for that project, and you could request $20,000. And so you just have to, there's a couple questions in the application where you provide explanation for why you're requesting additional funding. And those requests are honored when we can. So it's not guaranteed, but we try our best to look at a project and make a decision as a review committee about where to allocate any additional funds. Thanks for that question. Any other questions? Yeah, I don't have the ability to unmute everyone, but if you just raise your hand, then I can unmute you individually. And in the meantime, I will put my contact info in the chat. Oh, see a question coming through as well. Rebecca, could you drop your contact info in the chat as well? Or questions about web
Yes, I
grants?
can.
Question from Adelaide. This may be covered in the webpage, but if you could give a quick summary, that would be helpful. What are some of the things that need to be tracked and reported on in the grant reports once the application has been funded? Yeah, good question. Yeah, I don't think that we have that on the grant webpage at this time. It might actually be, there's something if you go into the request for applications, then, which I will drop a link to. I don't think I've done that yet. No? So this is the request for applications, and there is a section of that called Grant Management and Reporting. Grant Management Reporting, Section 5, page 21. So the report, what's asked for in the reports is summarized there for the interim status report and for the final report. But in general, the things that will need to be tracked would be money spent. And folks will upload their action plan and their rubric that they develop in the spring at the beginning of the grant. And then folks will also upload, now those are the only two things they'll upload. But yeah, you track your money, you upload your deliverables, and then you share out on what you've been doing with the grant and also how it's been working with your technical assistance providers in those 4 category areas. So local procurement, curriculum, school gardens, and meal program support. I hope that's helpful, Adelaide. If you have any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Great. And then another question from Becca and Megan, is there a preferred format or outline for the letters of support? Yeah, preferred format is PDF format. Like any letter that it can be on official letterhead is kind of like the classic way to do a letter of support from whatever organization, but it can also, doesn't necessarily have to have letterhead, but it does need to be in a form, like an uploadable document format that we can open. So just make sure that ideally it's PDF. I think we can open Word documents as well, as long as it's like a docx file. So yeah, that would be the preferred format. And then in terms of what to include, like have folks include in your letter of support. So I'm going to drop some info in the chat on that, but in the application and when you're asked for these letters of support, there's information about like what makes a strong letter of support. So strong letters will describe how the author will be an active participant in the grant activities and are from key personnel within the grant team. And then so that description is on page 16 to 17 of the request for our applications. And then letter of support is also kind of factored into the scoring criteria in a significant way. And so I just copy and pasted the language that's in the scoring criteria on that, which further clarifies how to get like 10 points for your letters of support would be that the letters of support demonstrate strong commitment from multiple stakeholders. All of the required letters are submitted, and the letters articulate specific and meaningful ways that the author will help support the development or expansion of the organization's farm to school or farm to early childhood program. I hope that is helpful. So again, for letters of support information, I'd go to page 16 to 17 of the RFA. And then I would also look at page 20 of the RFA, which is the scoring criteria. Any other questions? A couple minutes left. Okay. Not hearing any more questions, I think we can wrap this up. Thanks all for coming. I hope you were able to see the contact info in the chat and keep track of some of these links that'll be supportive as you work to put together an application. All right. Thanks, Kate. Thanks all. Enjoy your day and be in touch. Give me a call or an email if anything comes up after the